Why are people so angry today?
If you ask this question, do you think you'll be better off in 10 years? And do you think your children will have a better life than you? Both of those sort of define what it means to be an American. I mean, this is a country of hope and optimism. If you ask that question, what you find is the people who give the most pessimistic answer are whites who didn't go to college. The people who give the most optimistic answers are minorities, even though in many ways minorities have done worse in the past decade economically. And the people who give the second most pessimistic answer, after whites who didn't go to college, are whites who did go to college. And that's Trump's basis of support. You know, he's not running a Reagan campaign, the best America is yet to come. He does say make America great again, but most of his messages, things are awful, things are terrible, and I'm the guy to fix them. That message resonates with those voters.
His premise, make America great again, means that America's not great today.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's true to the and one of the reasons that you have this disconnect in the Republican Party, that message. Look, if you're the kind of person who's writing checks to Republican donors, you had some really scary Republican candidates. You had some scary moments back in 2008 and 2009, and maybe you're really worried about the long-term future of the country. But the fact is, you had a pretty good 5 years. Stock market's up, your wealth is up, you've recovered from the recession. But a lot of people have not, and a lot of the people who have not are Republicans. And that is the disconnect between the leadership of the party and where the base of the party is.
I've read your story 3 times because it is a treasure trove of information and just brilliantly written. So thank you for writing it. It's really interesting. You also say that there is an establishment party in the GOP and that they are completely disconnected from the rank and file.
Yeah. But, hey, I'm a member. I've worked in the Bush administration. I worked on the Giuliani campaign in 2007-8. I'm involved in all kinds of Republican donor groups, and I'm talking about my friends. And I just want to be clear here that these are public-spirited and capable people. But like all of us, they're the products of their experience. So after 2012, after that defeat, which I predicted, I wrote a book called Why Romney Lost that I published the day after the election. I promise you I didn't write it in 12 hours. But most of them were taken by surprise. And the party converged on this answer right away. The reason Romney lost, it wasn't that they were taking away Medicare from everybody under 55, and it wasn't they didn't have a jobs or wages message. It was he was too tough on immigration, which they never liked anyway. So I said, so let's junk the part of the message that we didn't like, double down on all the parts of the message that we did like, and see if that works any better. And this time, instead of Mitt Romney, we'll have Jeb Bush do it. Well, there we are.
You also say, David Frum, in this article in The Atlantic, that the elites misread the Tea Party movement.
Right. Look, the Tea Party movement becomes to national media attention with this famous Rick Santelli rant about mortgages. But I went to Tea Party rallies. The thing that got the bodies out, that got people really agitated, was in the summer of 2009. It was the threat to Medicare. And that was the summer of the town halls. That was the issue. They talk about debt, but why did they care about debt? Because it was a threat to Medicare. Look, that's not irrational, right? I mean, if you're 62 years old, about to retire, you've been through the shock of 2008, you're poor, and you had a bad decade before that, so you're not as well off as you thought you would be 15 years before. You need Medicare more than you ever thought you would. And the Obama health care plan did threaten it. But so many people who could write checks said, this is a movement in favor of the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. They want deregulation of banks. They want more immigration. And they didn't want any of those things.
You insinuate in the article that, where you touched on it there, the opposition to Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act is that they were afraid that they were going to lose theirs.
Right.
And that was the reason for the angst with the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah. Look, the way the Affordable Care Act purported to finance itself, it doesn't really finance itself, but the way it said it was with some higher taxes on the rich, some redistribution from healthy to sick inside the insurance system, but above all, with a big taking $500 billion over 10 years out of Medicare. And that was going to finance an extension of insurance to the uninsured. Now, most people don't know these numbers, but they intuit them. 27%. This is the most important fact, the most important statistic about the healthcare debate. 27% of the people who lack insurance in 2010 were foreign-born. That's not to say they're here legally, many of them. Many of them have become citizens, but it was immigration that created more than a quarter of the uninsurance problem. So if you're a 62-year-old native-born American who's worse off in 2009 than you were in 1999, and who's nearing retirement, and you're worried, and you don't want Medicare cut back, and the president's now saying, take a slice of your Medicare and give it to people who are born outside the country, you're going to be upset. And maybe you're not even, I'm not judging whether you're right or wrong to be upset, but you're going to be upset.
David Frum with us, former speechwriter for George W. Bush, has written an article in The Atlantic called The Great Republican Revolt. You touch on it in your article where it's all, and I'm going to ask you this question, but it's almost like Bernie Sanders is Donald Trump minus the offensive language, because they're both more or less talking about the same exact thing.
In different ways, yes. For different audiences, yes. And offering different kinds of solutions. Bernie Sanders is not a highly charismatic person, and he's saying the answer is more regulation, more systems, more taxes. Trump says the answer is me, big, wonderful me. He's a charismatic person. He offers himself. But it is true. Look, when the campaign began, Time magazine did a cover story showing Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, smiling side by side, and the title was something to the effect of, "These are the two other people in the election." And a lot of Americans think, did the people who spent that winter at Valley Forge, were they really fighting so that two vastly wealthy dynastic families could swap the presidency back and forth between themselves? Is that what the American Revolution was about? And I think both Sanders and Trump have tapped into that feeling.
But they both talk about immigration. They both talk about locking down the borders. They both talk about limiting free trade and sort of cutting off free trade and all those things. So in a sense, yeah, they're different people. One's not as charismatic. One isn't as offensive. But your article sort of points to the fact that you could make an argument that they're the same candidate in a sense.
There's some similarities. Just one more thing about immigration. Like I'm born in Canada. Actually, I have a double immigrant experience. My mother was born in America and was an immigrant to Canada. I was born in Canada. I'm an immigrant to the United States. Maybe it's commuting. But the point about immigration, I think Americans broadly accept immigration. But the way America runs immigration, when you see a CEO making $20 million a year, the thought must occur to you, hey, I bet there's some CEO in Bangalore who could do just as good a job for $2 million a year. Why don't we let him in the country? Oh, no, that's very difficult. If your health care costs are high because a heart surgeon makes $800,000 a year, maybe there's a heart surgeon in Dusseldorf who would be very happy to make $200,000 a year, because German doctors make much less than America. Those guys have a hard time coming in the country. The people who get exposed to the bracing winds of free competition in the labor market are the people who are making less than $60,000 a year. For them, total competition. For everybody at the top, total protection. And that is what I think drives so much of the anger about the immigration debate. The people at the top don't have to worry. When I visited a classroom in North Carolina when I was reporting an earlier book that had gone in the space of a decade from having no English second language learners in the class to having a third of the class be English second language learners. Well, that doesn't happen in my neighborhood school. The immigrants can't afford to move to my neighborhood.
David Frum with us, speechwriter for George W. Bush, and now has written an article for The Atlantic. I highly recommend it. What's been the reaction? Because in this article, you point to 4 different things that the GOP can do. What has been the reaction to this article since you've published it?
Well, this has been one of the very few things I've written where I've had positive responses from people all up and down the political spectrum, who see different things in it. As you said, it's very data rich, so even if you hate all my conclusions, you'll find information that you can use. But when I offer solutions, I'm not saying here's what I do. I'm saying here, Republicans have a problem, and here are 4 things they can do. And I have one of the 4 is the one I happen to like, but it's the one I think is least likely to result. What Republicans can do is say, hey, the problem, nothing wrong with our message. The problem is the messenger. Fire Jeb Bush, bring in Marco Rubio. He's more eloquent. He's got a better story. He's not inherited for his position. Let him take on the same message. Option A. Option 2 is say, maybe we did overdo this open borders thing. Let's make a deal with the anti-immigration people and find someone who will stick to tried and true conservative themes but change the immigration message. And that's sort of what Ted Cruz is doing. what I have urged, I don't think the party will listen in this cycle, is you need a real middle-class economic message. Still Republican, still conservative, but more Dwight Eisenhower and less Paul Ryan. Option 4 is, and I think this is where the party is sort of going without knowing it, is say, hey, Republicans run the Senate, run the House of Representatives, run most of the states. That's pretty good. And they've done all of that without changing their message. If you need to change the message to win the presidency, maybe if you have all those other things, you don't need the presidency so bad. And it's good that the legislature is good enough, because change is painful.
That's a really interesting argument. It's a really interesting conversation. It's in The Atlantic this month. David Frum is our guest. It is called The Great Republican Revolt, and the entire country is talking about it. David Frum, happy holidays. Thanks for checking in. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
You got it. 921 here, Big 550, KTRS. A different perspective from a man who sat there and wrote the words for President Bush. David Frum, former White House speechwriter for President Bush, has written an article about where the GOP goes from here. 921 here, Big 550 KTRS. If you missed any of that or want to air it or send it to a friend, we certainly have it up on KTRS.com, or will very shortly. If you follow us, just go to KTRS.com, or you can follow me on Twitter or Facebook or wherever else. It'll be up and out, so you can certainly